I am very curious, as we've talked about these two divisions time and time again, how we think they would stack up. And for the, not to go like all particular college basketball here, but when they line up, it's not perfect to the standings. It's more of like a general, you don't have the best team from last year playing against the worst team, but it's not necessarily a 1-1, 2-2, 3-3. So curious how everyone approached this from your own perspective, and who you think would end up winning between the SEC West and the Big Ten East.
The SEC West would win.
Overwhelmingly?
Not overwhelmingly, but like if you look at the best teams in the Big Ten East, like it's Ohio State versus Alabama. Either one of those teams could win that game. Number 2, Penn State, and then whoever you think the second best team in the West is, okay, competitive game. Then you start to get to Michigan, which is undefeated right now, but how has Michigan done historically in those games?
Against SEC teams?
Yeah, not great, but if you get Michigan in the right matchup, whether it's against like an Auburn, which we've already seen lose to Penn State, or an Ole Miss, I don't think they get embarrassed. I think they could win. I think so. When you get to those 3 teams, the Big Ten East has a legitimate shot to win against the top 3 in the SEC West. It's after you get past those 3 teams where you kind of lose, because no offense to Michigan State, 6-0, but your win total is 5.5. Like you started off 6-0, you still have to play Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Is Michigan State going to be a 9-10 win team? I don't think so. And I think that if you look at the team that they'd probably be lined up against, whether that's Texas A&M or Ole Miss or Arkansas, they could win, but I don't think that's a gimme. And then after you get past Michigan State, you've got Maryland, Indiana, and Rutgers. Who in the SEC West are Maryland, Indiana, and Rutgers beating?
So I had it 5-2 SEC West, with the real pivot point being the Maryland, Indiana, and Rutgers, where the worst teams from the SEC West are probably still going to win those games, and there's not much, not much confusion there. I gave Alabama the nod up at the top, but it was in the middle when I was looking at, like, if Michigan State lines up against Auburn, I'm going to pick Michigan State. If Michigan State lines up against LSU, I'm going to pick Michigan State. I'm not a believer that Michigan State is going to win those 3 huge games against division opponents, but I'm also a little bit lower on the midsection of that SEC West. Still, they'll clean up at the bottom, and I do think they'll probably take a win or 2 out of the top 4. So that's why I came out to 5-2 SEC West.
See, here's the thing, though. Like, when I power rate the teams in the SEC West, like Mississippi State and LSU are kind of close for the worst team in the division. Is Rutgers beating either of those teams?
No.
Is Indiana beating either of those teams?
That's what I'm saying. It's like
Indiana could beat LSU. LSU is a mess.
Yeah.
I don't think they would, but like it's not. You wouldn't make LSU like a 12-point favorite over Indiana, right?
Mm-hmm. I would be pushed back a little bit. I'm surprised my man Tom, Mr. Big Ten Tom,
came out.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful, because what you said about Michigan State, kind of holding that against them, saying, "Hey, what was their win total? 5.5. What was Arkansas's win total? Wasn't it like
6.5? I think.
Was it? I thought it was lower than that. I thought it would have been about the same. So I think we have to be careful in letting our preseason perception of teams affect the regular season, because I think what they've been doing is pretty special. Mm-hmm. And I actually would love to see them. I think in the matchups here, first of all, why can't we get this done? Like, how great would this be if you could actually have the Big Ten SEC showdown in the regular season of college football? It'd be insane. And then, like, some of them, like if you had Michigan A&M square off against each other, like, is that a slam dunk for the SEC? I would just push back on some of the top ones, because I might give out Ohio State the advantage against Alabama, or say at least it's a closer game than an automatic win. I think some of them are closer to toss-ups than automatic W's. Now, the bottom, I agree with you guys. The SEC West would own the bottom, probably the bottom 3. But I would say the top 4, I think, are a little bit more up in the air than saying, all right, it's 5-2, done, SEC West over Big Ten East.
To go back to Michigan State, I don't want to sit here and say that I think they're a bad team. I think that they're a much better team than we expected, and I think they've played well. It's just I'm not willing to look past the fact that Michigan State's 6 wins have been against Northwestern, Youngstown State, a Miami team that has not been anywhere near as good as we thought it would be, Nebraska, Western Kentucky, and Rutgers. I mean, you just have to look at Maryland, which was 4-0 a couple weeks ago, having beaten West Virginia, Howard, Illinois, and Kent State. and then lost by 37 to Iowa, and then lost by nearly 50 to Ohio State. So as soon as it stepped up in class, we kind of saw where Maryland was. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to Michigan State, but like I said, they do have to still play Michigan. They do have to play Ohio State. They have to play Penn State. We're going to know how good Michigan State really is when we get to those games.
I think this is a better question pre-Sean Clifford injury, because before the Sean Clifford injury, yes, I would take Alabama over Ohio State, but not by a ton, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they wouldn't be laying over a touchdown, I don't think. But like I would take Penn State with Clifford over any team from the Big Ten or from the SEC West, obviously, but I would not take Penn State with Roberson over basically anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you take Clifford off that team, even though I don't think he's great, like Roberson really struggled in that game. I agree with you guys. It's the bottom, right? Indiana is not a good team. Michigan State, I think, is an improved team. And even though I'm like Mr. Michigan State, and I thought they were going to make a bowl, like I certainly don't think that they would make a bowl playing an SEC West schedule, most likely. And then Rutgers is smoke and mirrors like crazy. So, yeah, I'm with you guys on that.
But that's like my 5-2. I'm not trying to be dismissive. That's imagining they split the top 4. Like
it's certainly closer to, I think, like 4-3, 3-4 than it is to 7-0.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like 5-2 is decisive, but it's not like, I don't want the listeners to think we're thinking that like the Big Ten is going to be double-digit dogs in all these games. They're not. It's just slightly better at certain spots.
It's a lot closer this year than it has been in most years in recent memory. And I would say if instead of doing it by division, if you just took the 5 best teams from each conference and let them face off in that kind of way, it'd probably be 3-2 one way or the other.